澳洲名城墨尔本以丰盛的欧陆情调和古老宏伟的维多利亚建筑而闻名。100年前，这座城市就拥有了宽敞便捷的矩阵型街道网和富丽堂皇的歌剧院。如果把19世纪中期的淘金潮作为背景，这座城市稍显颓废的贵族情调就显得更为生动。墨尔本曾经是一座黄金堆砌的城市，这里也曾经是6万多个淘金客寻梦的他乡。
My name is Asu. I'm a miner from Taishan district and now working on the Canton Lake.
Well, I've been in camp now some 6 months near some 20 Chinamen's camp. And they come up to our tent at 6 o'clock in the morning, take a log, and walk away with it.
We do understand this anger.
I think when it's 200 feet from their tent, they ought to know the difference between taking it from another man's property and taking it from their own.
My countrymen protected and shelter me and deeply respect my owner, but the European miners treat all Chinese very bad.
They take the water out of one hole and let the tailings fall into another one, and so destroy the water in both holes.
In wintertime, we can take plenty of water, but in summertime, we are not allowed to take a drop of water.
90 out of every 100 Chinese smoke opium.
We do not marry Chinese. We don't even understand what they're talking about. We have no communication with them at all.
I pray each day to return to my homeland so that I can see my family. I don't want to die here.
1851年，去美国旧金山的淘金潮后，澳洲东南部的维多利亚发现了丰富的浅表金矿。来自世界各地的淘金客蜂拥而至，其中有6万淘金客来自中国的广东。当时的中国正值满清和太平天国之争，乡间因此有很多因田地发生的纠纷。台山地区耕地很少，很多族群发生械斗。曾经在1个月内有3000人在田地之争中丧生，许多家庭面临严重的经济困境。据说当时一名在墨尔本做工的木匠把发现金矿的好消息写信告诉台山的家人。澳洲发现金矿的消息给这些生存困境中的家庭带来一线希望。
The way they came was originally they were recruited by a company in Hong Kong or in Guangzhou who was acting as agent for a merchant in Australia. And they would go to the villages and get 100, 200 men from the village and pay for their fare on the ship to come out to Australia, pay for their food and where they could live when they're on the goldfields. And they paid them a salary, but they deducted from the salary the cost of bringing them out to Australia.
People were very poor in China. And the families, they were hoping that they could come to the gold fields and make a significant amount of money and take it back, and their families would all be better off. Some of them were able to do that, some of them of course weren't.
大量华人淘金客的涌入引起欧裔矿工的恐慌和敌意。1855年，维多利亚政府对华人矿工征收10磅入境税，并且限制船只运载华人的数量。已经借钱付路费的华工不愿意再付这笔钱，因此改由南澳的亚德雷德港或罗伯市登陆，然后步行500里到达矿区。
When the gold rush had been happening for 3-4 years, some of the Europeans, miners in Australia, particularly in Victoria, complained that the Chinese were too dirty. They were using the water up too much that was used for washing the gold. And they didn't like the look of Chinese people, they didn't like their language, they didn't like their food, and they complained to the government. Sometimes there was fighting against the Chinese, sometimes they were attacked. After 3 or 4 years, the Victorian government, which was a colony of Britain at that stage, the government decided to put the Chinese people into a special place in their own town outside the goldfields. So whichever goldfield, Ballarat, Bendigo, Castlemaine, Ararat, whichever place the gold was, the government said the Chinese had to live on the outside of the town in the new town, which was called the Chinese camp.
因为文化和宗教信仰有巨大的差异，欧裔矿工和华人矿工形成2个互不来往的群体。华人的外貌打扮和一些生活习俗成为笑柄，在一些极端的欧洲人那里成为憎恨的目标。华人矿工通常不被准许进入欧裔矿工的采矿区，只准在淘剩的废矿区淘金。但是也有例外的情况。1855年，一批华工在一个叫阿拉瑞特的村庄露营时，在河边发现了金沙，自此发现了著名的广东矿床，这是全球含量最丰富的浅层冲击金矿之一。
等陣我見到嗰度，而家我覺到嚿好大嚿㗎，好大嚿嘅金啊！你睇到冇？嗰個黃色嘅喎。
It was all due to the Chinese who discovered it, and they ran out of food, and they had to go to a little area close to here where the other miners were working, and the word got out that they'd found gold, and of course a huge rush developed, and between 20 and 30,000 people arrived on the Ararat diggings, and the town of Ararat was founded, and as we say, it was the only city founded by Chinese.
阿拉瑞特是沿着当时广东矿床和它5公里长的隧道建立的。现在这里已经没有金山客的后裔居住。淘金潮之后，华人差不多都离开了阿拉瑞特，大部分回到中国，也有少数因为各种原因不能还乡。这里是最后一批金山客的影像，他们曾经在阿拉瑞特以种菜为生。1950年前后，最后一位中国淘金客在阿拉瑞特去世。墨尔本附近的另外一个城市班迪格，曾经被称为新金山。这里是淘金时期著名的金矿区，至今仍有淘金公司在距地面100米深的地方作业。年轻时做过矿工的 Norm 带我们参观了1930年代的矿井。
Back, please.
Now, we're going down 61 metres at the moment, folks. That is the second level of the mine. Actually, the mine has 17 levels all told, and it is 412 metres deep. But we today are only going down to number 2, 61 metres. So here we go, folks, on our way. This is concrete out here, as you can see. It's all what we call shotcrete, sprayed on with a gun type of thing to make the area safe, to stop any loose rocks from falling. So that's the idea today. Small step there, just watch that as you come out. Stand there for a moment, I'll be with you. Come. There's your white quartz. That's what you find your gold in. If you have a close look right here, you can see something there very interesting, can't you? That is fool's gold. Real name, iron pyrites. Now, how do you tell the difference from real gold and fool's gold? Well, one, fool's gold reflects the light back at you. It shines, it glitters, where real gold does not do that. Gold, well, it's gold. It's the only way you can explain it, isn't it, really? It's got a colour all of its own, gold, and nothing else really looks like it. So once I show you a real piece of gold in a moment, which I'm going to, you'll soon work out which is which. That is fool's gold. Here is your real gold.
It's already there.
There it is. It's in the rock, you see. Fool's gold up above. Compare those two, and you see how that one reflects the light as you move, where that one does not. You hold the spot of your light on that and just lean a little bit sideways, and you'll notice it never ever changes colour. It's always the same from whatever angle you look at it. It never changes. This is the drill display area here now, and I'm going to give you a demonstration on the early method. This is how it was done back in the 1840s and 50s. The hammer and tap method, as they called it. Now, one man was known as the tap man. He held that perfectly steady in his hole like that. He dare not move it, while his mate was back here, hitting that as hard as he could with the hammer. And in between taps, like so, he would twist that a quarter of a turn. And that's what went on until they got their holes in the rock to put explosives in. It would have been a slow, hard, tedious job, wouldn't it? Must have been a terrible job, actually.
Would they use the same way as the European miners?
Now, there was a difference. The European miner always dug a mine shaft that was square. Chinese always dug a round shaft. Now, for two reasons. One, the round shaft is very strong. There's no edges can fall in. So for strength, number one, it was a good idea. And the second one, you might correct me on this, but as far as I understand is this. The Chinese are a very superstitious race. And they didn't dig a square hole because the evil spirits could hide in the corners. It was made in 1882, that drill. It was made locally here in Bendigo. It had a few problems. That drill, of course, was a dry drill, as we call them. And that, of course, pounded backwards and forwards like this, hammer action, as we say. It was therefore known as a stroker. And that, of course, the tip of the drill up the front there, as you can see, would, of course, pound into the rock. And you can imagine the dry, fine, powdery dust that was making, which came out all over these two men that were working this machine. They breathed that dust in, didn't they? And they very quickly started coughing. And they, of course, were coughing their lungs out very quickly. They were developing silicosis, or minus ptysis, which of course is dust on the lungs. Terrible thing to have. So the more you used a machine like that, the worse you got. And you cough, 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 and eventually got that you couldn't stop. That machine caused a lot of health problems. Men died at a young age because of that problem. It was commonly referred to as the widowmaker.
即使在后期的工业化时代，金矿仍然有非常高的危险度。可以设想，19世纪中期，一切靠人手操作的淘金客，一定为自己的所得付出高昂。金山的传奇让更多的中国淘金客来到澳洲。在新金山的桥街，曾经在淘金潮后期形成过一个颇为繁荣的唐人街。这间金龙博物馆就是在唐人街旧址上建立起来的。金山客后裔雷阳明和他的太太 John 筹款建立了这家博物馆。他们对班迪格的华裔家族进行了研究，发现班迪格现存的华裔之间几乎全部都有血缘关系。
Connects all these Chinese families of Bendigo to Chinese. And it all starts with 4 European women marrying Chinese. They all marry Chinese. Every one of them. One family.
One family?
One family. Four of this Englishman's daughters all marry Chinese. And from there, all these Chinese people come. All the Chinese names are Bendigo.
That's my auntie. My auntie there. That's my auntie's two children. They had a boy and a girl.
班迪格现在居住的中国人后裔中，很多人是中欧混血，这在早期的中国移民史中非常罕见。早年出洋的中国人在当地往往是被歧视的族群。另一方面，中国人本身的传统文化也一向排斥和外族通婚，因此这种结合必然是困难重重。John 给我们讲了一个发生在20世纪初的悲惨故事。
He had married this Chinese, and at one stage there he was persecuted. He wasn't allowed to sell gold, and he had a jeweller shop first, and then he had a sweet shop. And her neighbours were always teasing her and tormenting her and calling her children, half-caste children and all this. And she started to drink very heavily. And in those days, of course, she lost about 4 or 5 young children. And her sad fate was that she actually was charged with, she actually took a European woman to court, which was very, very unusual in those early days. So she must have been a very strong person. But then eventually, of course, time caught up with her and she actually died in the jail here in Bendigo. So that's a very sad story about an intermarriage in those very early days.
墨尔本东北的小镇比茨沃斯，当地中学的图书管理员 Vivian 写了一本关于中国淘金客的书《比茨沃斯的小广东》。
He was a little fellow, just 5'1" he stood, and though his face was yellow, it seemed so sweet and good. To love it would impel you, this player of Fantan. I suppose I need not tell you that he was a Chinaman. His name was Jinny Wangya, his manner mild and meek. He lived in an old gunya, not far from Silver Creek. Though men of other nations heaped on him foul abuse, in many occupations I found him of much use. And though my friends disgusted would freely reprehend, Jim still I firmly trusted and treated as a friend. He honoured all my wishes, he hated all my foes, scrubbed floors, washed up the dishes, and mended shoes and clothes. I noticed that my chickens were getting daily less, though going where the dickens I really could not guess. When Wangya I consulted as to the cause of that, the answer thus resulted, me tink him fella cat. Though I, my mastiff howler, might now be of some use to nab that feline prowler, I therefore let him loose. That night I long lay dreaming about what Jim had said, but wakened by loud screaming, I quickly sprang from bed. I hurried on some clothing and rushed into the night, when you can guess my loathing and anger at the sight of Wangya lying howling beneath the starry skies, while Howler over him growling defied him to arise. I knew by his screeches he could not be much hurt, though Howler had his breeches and nearly half his shirt. The dog I quickly quieted, while Wangya seized his clothes, and trembling and affrighted he speedily arose, demanding what the matter. Tonight me come look see, to try to catch him catsa, him Howler catch him me. It shocked old Mother Grundy the way I kicked that man, but for many a Sunday he did not play Fantan.
What's this poem about?
It's about prejudice. They thought he was useful just to work, and he thought he was a thief after that, didn't even give him a chance. And I just thought it was pretty disgusting. But I put it in there because I thought it might interest people, and it obviously has. There were houses all
1969年 Vivian 偶然在自己的屋后发现了中国营地的旧址，开始挖掘埋在地下的中国人遗物。
Looks everywhere. Yep. Oh, look, there's a coin. Woohoo!
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, where did you get it?
I dug them up.
You dig them up.
They had opium in them. And I found a piece of the pipe, but I haven't cleaned it because I'm frightened it'll break, but it's brass, and that's how it used to go. On a bamboo or on a wooden pipe. Now, I have got a beautiful one, but it's a bit erotic. Does that matter?
No, it's okay.
Okay. It's beautiful, but I have to keep it covered.
You've got a lot of precious things.
I have.
Wow.
Isn't it beautiful? I won't put it round the other way. But that's a lotus leaf. And see, that was smoked through there. And that was in one of these.
When did you begin to do the research on them?
Oh, wasn't long after. Because when I started to find these things, I thought, no, I've got to find out more about this. And then the digging, I didn't do so much. I did the research then. That's 1972.
阅读了当时关于中国营地的所有法庭记录和报纸消息后， Vivian 写出了比兹沃斯的小广东，里面记载了大量中国人和欧裔妇女的同居或婚姻状况。根据他的调查，当时和中国人在一起的欧裔妇女，多数是在自身族群中地位低下的爱尔兰妓女。
If a European woman married a man, a Chinese man or a dark man, they would never be welcome back in their family. And as you know, there was a lot of prejudice against the Chinese in those days because they were finding gold and we were jealous because we didn't work as hard and we didn't save as much. Women from respectable families would not be allowed near a Chinese man. So they would, I mean, gosh, they're normal men. They want the company of women, not only sexually, but you need companionship. There were only 2 Chinese women came to Beechworth in 100 years. Only 2.
Why the prostitute want to marry with Chinese?
Because the Chinese were good to them. Of course they would. The European men treated them like filth, but the Chinese men didn't.
淘金潮时期，澳洲中国人的男女比例是15000比1，也很少有人能负担昂贵的路费回乡娶妻。更重要的是，当时的淘金客都是非常重视家乡传统的中国农夫，每个人的愿望都是赚到足够的钱后返回家乡。因此，选择和一个异族女子生活，实际是环境所迫。当时这种结合在2种文化中都是不被接受和祝福的。他们的孩子承受的是没有归属的夹缝生活。Robin 的曾祖父来自中国。
This is my mother.
Yeah.
And in Australia in the 1950s, where I was living, nobody looked like that. Nobody talked about it much. My mum had some stories, but not many. So we didn't know any actual facts.
Why nobody talk about it?
I think because of the racist element.
Your mother must have suffered a lot about that.
Sure, yeah. And even when my mother, who lived into her 70s, was in her final illness, and I took her to the doctor, and we sat down, you know, on a bench, and this other woman got up and moved away. And she's had things like that. People be rude to her. People who are drunk, for example, would say something. When I was a baby and they lived in their first home, after the war, people had to live in flats and the toilets were out the back. They were shared. And she still talks about, or she did, how this woman told my father that she didn't want to use the same toilet as my mother. And that my mother had to find another toilet. This is ridiculous. Yeah. So.
But now I think things is different now.
You think?
I hope so.
Well, stay in Australia a bit longer.
It's 1892.
1892. Because of the mother and the father. His father's name was there too, isn't it? Louis Hockey.
Oh.
And his
Yeah.
and
Louis
his
Aku.
Key. I think that's Key, Kate, I believe. And Lao Shi was his mother.
Yeah. It's a Chinese spelling.
Yeah, they were the Chinese. Yeah. And then my mother's names were down there.
Did you feel any different when you was a kid because you are mixed blood?
Yeah. But when you went to school, you know, you got all called all sorts of things. Chinese were looked down on those days, not like they are now. They're accepted everywhere now around a lot here.
How do you feel to be half Chinese?
Oh, I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that, yeah.
Why?
Well, it's a hard question, isn't it? Why do I feel that way? It's kind of, well, that was you were born that way, I suppose. And, you know, half Chinese, and that was it. I just said to my wife the other day, I wish they hadn't changed that name, left the Louis off, left it Louis Gun. It would have been a lot of people I know now still call me Louis, which is the surname, isn't it? The first name was the surname.
85岁的 Loy 还记得，父亲以前每个星期五会带他到唐人街喝茶。现在，班迪格的唐人街已经不存在了。每天，他会走半个小时到这座中国花园散步。虽然经历过很多伤心的过往，但是有个中国父亲，并不是一件永久的耻辱。20世纪中期，白澳政策逐渐解冻，澳洲开始实行多元文化的治国政策。在经历1个世纪的耻辱和隐瞒之后，许多淘金客的后裔开始正视自己的来历。Kevin 是金山客的第4代后裔，从小说英文长大。在研究过自己的家族史之后，决定从头开始学习中文。
This is my 这个我的历史，我的故事。故事，中国的书线。
Can you read it for us?
在澳大利亚，我是小孩子的时候。是好。被写的书先知道了。每星期我的妈妈看报。他醒了，他写的书先告诉将来在中学的时候，我把中国的书想知道了。
你属什么？
好了。
你属什么？
我属老鼠。
属老鼠。
属老鼠。对。The year 2000, I planned to visit. I was visiting China, and I went to Guangzhou and went to the bus station. And asked which bus to catch to Beitou. Or actually, I went to Tengmei, I think, which I believe was the sort of nearest stop, because I didn't have a very detailed map. But The conductress on the bus she was very helpful. She found me, she said I would have to take a taxi to the village, but that taxi turned out to be a motorbike. So but she asked the driver to take me, and I went, and the price kept going up, but anyhow I got to the village, and I was so well received. He was just under 70 years of age when I met him. And when he knew who I was and where I was from, he took my hand and walked me through the village to his house, where all of his sons and daughters-in-law and his wife were. And he held my hand for a long time. You know, it was the warmest greeting.
Lisa 是墨尔本的第3代华人。为了了解自己的中国家族，了解自己的中国血统，她制作了一部纪录片。
Mum and Dad couldn't understand each other in Chinese. They spoke different dialects. The only Chinese words we knew were names of food, instructions, and swear words. It didn't occur to me that I was different until I started school. Kids would always drill me to say something in Chinese. Embarrassed, I'd pretend that I was fluent and blurt out sentences consisting of a smorgasbord of food in Cantonese. Bok choy, char siu bao, gai, mian bao, lo bak fan. Well, if that didn't satisfy them, I'd say the last 3 things I could think of. Fong pi, da bian, da si, which is Shanghainese for fart, poo and piss. Mum would say things like, don't sleep opposite the mirror, that's bad luck. You shouldn't eat mandarins when you have a cold. They heat your blood. You should marry a Chinese.
Yeah.
I'm very confused. When faced with making a decision, I'd choose the bad.
You'll see in the film, it says that I said that I actually didn't feel different until I started school. Because when you were young and you were surrounded by your aunts and uncles, the Chinese were a very close-knit community and they stick together. And so you'd only see, you know, Chinese faces and Chinese people when you go to Little Bourke Street to Chinatown and you'd, you know, go shopping there and you'd hear everybody speaking to each other, and my cousins were there, and so you never noticed that so much because you weren't out in the big world, big wide world with all these people. So people would, you know, point you out in the street, and you'd think, oh, you'd go into a shop and you'd want to be served and there'd be white people around you and you wouldn't get served, and I'd go, well, is that because I'm Chinese? They don't want to serve me because I'm secondary? Or do they just not see me because I'm short? or are they just serving these people because they haven't noticed me or something? But it was being different. When you're a teenager, when you're an adolescent, you want to fit in. You want to be the same as everyone else, but it's very difficult if you look different. If somebody did something discriminatory to me now, and it was a problem of to do with being employed or something, if I felt strongly enough about it, I'd complain to the Equal Opportunities or Ethnic Affairs. But it depends on the situation.
We've had to buy in all our hay because no one from this whole region, from north of the divide, has been able to, that's why the locks are on here too, no one has been able to produce hay. Because this is the worst drought in history, we've been for the last 12 months feeding. Grain, hay, grain, everything, just trying to keep our cattle alive, okay? And it's just normally not like this ever.
Warren 是墨尔本西北一个小镇的牧场主。当他发现自己的曾祖母是中国人后，几次到中国旅行。现在在做把澳洲种牛出口到中国的生意。
Okay.
How did you find out you have some Chinese blood?
It's always just, we always knew. We always knew, but we never, I have German, English, Irish, Scottish and Chinese in my makeup. Crossbred. But so, and we just don't, in those early times it didn't matter what nationality you had in your background because we're all Australian.
But it looks like you love China a lot.
Yeah, China is a very special place, and right from, even though we didn't take any real notice that we had Chinese blood, from a very young age I had more to do with Chinese people in Australia and did not even realise why.
Maybe something in your bone.
Maybe in my heart, yes. The breed I'm developing myself. It's got a mixture of bloodlines like me, but Lehigh, very strong. Come on.
How many cattle do you have in this farm?
Only this paddock, only a couple of heifers and a bull. I just keep these ones isolated. But yeah, I have about 50 cows, plus the calves, then the bulls. So, but 50 breeding cows for beef. All this is for beef. My friends would like to take him to Neimungu. Yes, this particular bull. They've inspected him twice the last 2 trips here, and they do like him. But he is my own special breed, so for him to go into China, we have special import duties, but that's possible. Yeah.
Are you okay for let him go to China?
Absolutely. Yeah, it would be good actually for production of more beef, but also there are some very good beef cattle in China.
How about your first trip in China?
Yeah, a good experience, but it took a lot of getting used to, just so many people, and the landscape. Some areas the landscape is like Australia, but some other regions just so different. Many people had never seen a foreign person, a Lowway, many times, and they would just be fascinated when you travelled with them on the train, and when you go to a small village and you would hear Lowway Lala many times, but I would say Busha Lowway Zungwaran. Come on.
苏振熙是墨尔本市的第一位华人市长，他带我们参观了历史悠久的市政厅。
Melbourne 嘅名咧就係得自呢個嗰時英國嘅首相Lord Melbourne， 佢係當時呢個大英帝國嘅首相。
你那畫像是不是以後會掛在這個地方？
如果畫咗之後，佢哋通常會擺喺出邊咯，擺喺嗰個係
走廊裏面。
走廊裏邊係。
你剛才說他不是說經常會，不是所有的市長都會有畫像。
不是，因為80年咧都未畫過一個，就係第一個女嘅市長係1987年。咁呢次咧係80年內咧就係第二個有畫像嘅，因為我係第一個民選嘅市長，所以佢哋認為有歷史價值，所以就畫一張我嘅像啊嘛。喺呢幾十年裏頭嘅演變咧，咁而家澳洲人咧都已經係好接受、好接受呢個其他嘅文化，咁尤其呢個中國人喺呢個Melbourne 咧個歷史好悠久嘅，咁 Melbourne 嘅唐人街係離開中國嘅地區，喺世界上係呢個唐人聚居最長久嘅地方嚟嘅，因為佢已經有超過150年嘅。你好多啲建築物咧，你睇得到咧，係你 Melbourne 成立咗係160幾年嘅，所以換句嚟講咧，佢已經係同 Melbourne 一齊成長，所以變咗係唐人咧，即係中人咧喺喺 Melbourne 嚟講咧，已經係融入咗呢個主流社會嘅，已經係被接受嘅。
墨尔本曾经是一座淘金客建立的城邦。19世纪中期的淘金潮中，62990个中国人到达过这里，其中48000人返回中国，其他人或者落地生根，或者永远长眠于此。 在中国，他们被叫做金山客。